whenever you've got a bunch of people of different ages who have conflicting interests and conflicting needs, and you want to keep everybody happy and you want to reduce the stress, like that is the main goal with family travel, right? Is to get rid of the things that might cause conflict or stress, like annoying logistics, lines, crowds, and find ways of keeping everybody happy, whether they're the 80-year-old grandparents or the teen or the toddler. And we're seeing more and more of these multi-generational groups of travelers taking trips and wanting more and more advice along these lines. So I personally, I've spent the past 21 years traveling with my offspring. They've actually now been to more than 60 countries each. They've been to Morocco, Romania, Uzbekistan, and traveling gives your children such a confidence that I think serves them very well in life. And of course, it's also how we create global citizens, is by taking our children and introducing them to different cultures around the world and letting them see how much we have in common with each other, right? There are differences with other cultures, but there are also so many similarities. And that's what I love it, when my children find this common ground with people in very different cultures around the world. I want to tell you that our best trip ever, the one that everyone just enjoyed the most, was when we went sailing on a goulette off the coast of Turkey. Because it was the most vacation-like that our travel has ever been. And everybody got to, what was so great was that everybody in the family, they got to do their own thing and have their own freedom. And yet we were all also together at the same time. And it's just wonderful when a trip can kind of make everybody happy in that way. So I want to just share my top 3 tips. Well, not my top 3, but a few tips for traveling with kids that these are actually my children's tips. My younger son, Doug, his tip is to bring a soccer ball when you travel, because everywhere in the world, there are kids playing soccer. And when you arrive with a soccer ball, you've got instant friends. And then when you leave the country, you leave the soccer ball with your new friends as a memento, and they remember you. My older son, Charlie, his big tip is when you're going to museums, because we've spent a lot of time in museums, and a lot of kids, you know, I don't know, some kids might go kicking and screaming to museums, but Charlie's tip is go to the gift shop first, have your child buy postcards, like their 5 favorite works of art. And then once they've got those, they go through the museum on a scavenger hunt, finding those works of art that are in the postcards. My last tip is what my younger son, Doug, does, which is play the piano. Anytime there is an empty piano, an unoccupied piano in our travels, he sits down and plays it. Pianos, the train station in Brussels, streets around the world, where music stores, hotel lobbies all over, wherever there is a piano, he sits down and starts to play. And let me tell you, everybody comes over and starts talking. It's a total icebreaker. It's a conversation starter wherever you are in the world. So with those are my tips. Now I would like to hand it over to Brooke Wilkinson, who is our executive editor. She has traveled with her son, Zeke, to many different countries, and she's going to tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. And thank you everyone out there for joining us. It's great to see a lot of familiar names among those listeners tonight. Many of you know me because we've emailed in the past about trips you're trying to plan. Part of my role here is connecting travelers. First of all, helping travelers kind of figure out what trip is right for them. And often with a family or another group like that, there are a lot of factors that come into play. So we can help kind of sort through the timing, the people's interests, and find the right destination. And then once you've got it narrowed down to the right destination, we connect you with the right planner there to make that trip happen. And just before I jump into my tips, a few housekeeping notes. Make sure to open up the Q&A box in Zoom. If you have any questions for any of our panelists tonight, put them in there and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. My colleague Flory is also working behind the scenes and dropping in links in that Q&A box to articles and other resources that we might mention over the course of the evening. So first of all, as Wendy mentioned, my son Zeke is 12. So we're in those years where we have to plan travel around the weeks he has off from school. And at first, I thought that meant we'd have to deal with crowds and high prices, but I've learned that there's a much better strategy. If you think beyond the obvious destinations, those holiday weeks can be ideal times to hit places during shoulder season, which is when things are quieter and more affordable. So for spring break, we've done an African safari. We've gone to Southeast Asia. And yeah, in both of those cases, Zeke missed a few extra days of school. We couldn't quite fit it into 1 week. But these days, post-COVID, every one of his assignments is on Google Classroom. So I've found that that's really not the problem that it might have been back in previous years. Thanksgiving's another great holiday to travel in the US. It's busy, US airports are packed, but obviously it's not a holiday anywhere else in the world. And so it's a lovely time to go abroad. During that week, we've gone to Egypt. Jim Berkeley, who you'll meet soon, planned a wonderful trip for my family to Egypt over Thanksgiving week. We've also gone to Norway this past Thanksgiving. So I've found that those holidays really aren't the problem that you might think they are. So my son isn't quite as well traveled as Wendy's kids are yet, but he's up to 16 countries so far. And here's what I've learned over the course of those trips. First of all, I always try to choose experiences that are hands-on. We rarely hit museums on our travels, but we get our history and culture in other ways. So we've, explored a cave built by a pre-Viking civilization in Iceland. We've clambered through a Viet Cong hideout in the middle of downtown Saigon. We made cheese with a farmer when we were in Norway last year, and that wasn't just hands-on. We were literally up to our elbows in whey, and Zeke had the best time. Those were all experiences arranged through Wowlist travel experts, and they engaged Zeke and frankly all of us really in a way that simply talking about a place or looking at a museum display never could. I started asking for hands-on experiences for Zeke, and I realized that it's really what I love most when I'm traveling as well. My second tip is to make travel a focus of your life at home, your daily life, not just your time away. And I feel like if you model that being a traveler is part of your identity, your kids will pick up on that. They're always noticing things that we may or may not want them to notice that we're doing. So in my house, we have a hallway devoted to photographs that Zeke has taken on our trips. And every time he walks to his room, he sees Egypt, he sees Iceland, Vietnam, Norway, and he's reminded of the memories he made in each of those places. He also has 2 world maps on the wall in his room with pins for all the places he's visited, the place he's going next, his dream destination. We read books of different destinations. And because of all this, Zeke takes pride in being a traveler. It's really become part of his identity. And what that really helps with is that he rolls with the punches when things aren't super exciting, and he doesn't complain when we have a long flight or a boring drive. There are parts of travel that are less exciting than others, and he knows it's simply the cost of entry for the fun that's coming down the road. Okay, and for my last tip, I asked Zeke, what's your top tip for traveling with kids? And he said, kids get antsy. And he's right, so keep things active. We've ridden bikes. Jim arranged bikes in Egypt to get us from site to site. We've gone zip lining in Laos. My husband was absolutely terrified, but he did it anyway because he knew that would get Zeke to go, and we all had a blast. And when we went on safari, we started in Namibia, which is not necessarily kind of the first timer safari destination. And the focus is not on the animals, but on driving ATVs and climbing huge sand dunes. So by the time we got to South Africa, Zeke had burned off enough energy that he happily signed on for 2 game drives a day and loved the experience. And even when one morning I said, hey, do you want to sleep in? You don't have to come out in the morning game drive. He said, are you kidding? I'm there. So think about how to sprinkle those active elements throughout your trips. And so now I'm going to pass things on to Hannah Howard, another editor here at WendyPerrin.com, who has young preschoolers at home.
And I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm saving all of these tips from Wendy and Brooke for when my kids are a little older. They are my daughter was born April 2020, so we didn't get to go anywhere for a little while with her. She'll be 4 in April, and I have a 2-year-old son. And so I'm still learning very much how to travel with 2 little people. And it's been a challenge, and it's been so rewarding and exciting. So I'm going to share three of my tips that make things just a little bit less painful. I remember the first time going to the UK, where we have family, with a baby, and thinking, how could I bring so many diapers? But of course they have diapers or the equivalent most places in the world. So, we all know that little people come with a lot of stuff, but I think as light as possible that you can pack is the best. And we've had adventures getting snacks, getting wipes in various corner stores in the south of France. Also just check out a cheap place for some toys or fun little things. We love going to Poundland when we're in England and letting the kids choose a few things, and that way they have something novel to bring along. And if you lose it or it breaks, no worries. My second tip is just to not be overly ambitious. I tend to want to do all of the things and have all of the adventures, but for little people, it's a huge adventure just being in a different environment. And so for us, the sweet spot ended up being one thing a day, really, with them, and then the rest was kind of bonus. You're only as happy as your least happy kid. We've all discussed that here. And then the other tip that I've happily discovered by accident is to make playground friends. Kids are great at making friends wherever they go. Wherever we're traveling, I always map out all the playgrounds, because that's where we're at this stage of our lives. But it's been fantastic way to meet locals and parents with kids our age. So we've been invited to share a pint, share a coffee. I've even I'm on now, like, the West London moms WhatsApp moms group that says, like, oh, there's a great opportunity with a water park pop up today or something like that. So let your kids help you make friends, and it's amazing for them to get to make friends too.
Hannah, thank you so much. Those are great tips. I remember the days when my kids were that young. Thank goodness that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And now we would like to pass the microphone along to Susan Crandall, who is Brooke's mom. We are so thrilled and honored to have Brooke's mom with us. She's an amazing traveler and an amazing writer, and she has written articles where she's shared these wonderful nuggets of wisdom for travel. But I don't want to say anything more. Susan, please share with us your thoughts about traveling with your grandchild.
Well, I'm so happy to be here because some of the trips I've taken with my family are the peak moments of my life. I mean, my screensaver still, I think 5 years later, is the 5 of us in the Galapagos. We have a very small family. I'm an only child. My daughter's an only child. She has 1 child. So if everybody goes on a trip, it's only 5 people. And but it's a magical 5. We've been to Paris, we've been to Yosemite, we've been to the Galapagos, we've been to Belize. Last year we went to Iceland. And I guess my first tip is, remember, if you're the matriarch or the patriarch and maybe you're paying the bills, you don't get to make all the decisions. You need to involve everybody who's going on the trip in what you're about to do. You really need to get a buy-in from everybody. And sometimes it's a compromise. I mean, I love horseback riding, and not all my family shares that. But when we went to Iceland, everybody agreed to go horseback riding with me. And I think it turned out fairly well. And then I'm not crazy about four-wheel ATVing because it seems noisy and bumpy and so forth. So I went along on that. and it was very interesting. And it was noisy and bumping, but it was also very interesting. So I think there is that kind of compromise and push and pull and figuring out, what's going to work for everybody. And I guess also think about the pacing of a trip for your family. I think our guiding principle probably is FOMO, fear of missing out. I mean, in Iceland, we did a lot of 12-hour days, and everybody, including Zeke, was right along with us, because that's just kind of what we're about. And I think there are other people who really, really want to kick back. And that's good too. So, talk about all those things, think about all those things. I think this is something that the TTEs can always provide, but have the right guide for kids. Talk to your travel provider about that. I remember when Zeke was 5, we went to Yosemite, and he walked 5 miles one day. And I think a lot of that was simply because we had a guide that just connected with him immediately and made every minute of that exciting. I don't think the little packets of M&Ms that Brooke brought along hurt either. But it really was the guide who pulled us through that day. And I guess my last tip is, if you're hesitating and you can afford it to take a second family trip in a year, do it. The year before COVID, oh, I'm sorry, there's a train going by. I live on the Hudson River, and the train is whistling as it goes by my house. But it is a symbol of travel. But anyway, so what was I talking about?
Our 2 trips before
Oh,
COVID.
the 2 trips. Yeah, we went to the Galapagos, and it was so fabulous that I kind of said, well, let's take next year's trip this year. And so we booked an Alaskan cruise for our family, and my husband was going along with us then, and we did it. And our next year's trip was canceled because of COVID. So we really did take, the extra trip that year. And the other thing that happened was my husband, who's in his late 80s, decided he just really couldn't travel anymore. And I'm so grateful that he was able to go with us on that extra trip to Alaska. So, time is precious, and use it wisely. See the world.
Life is short, seize the
Yeah.
day. That's awesome advice. I think we all learned that during the pandemic. Susan, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So now I'd like to turn the conversation to Jennifer Virgilio, who is one of our rock star trusted travel experts on the WOW list. Jennifer is coming to us from London. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
And she is on the WOW list. She's a specialist for France, England, Italy, Switzerland, and she has a lot of advice to share and solutions to offer for Europe this year, especially Europe this summer. There's a lot to know. So Jennifer, take it away.
So this year is going to be really an interesting year for us in Europe because there are so many events. There are besides the Paris Olympics, we have all the Taylor Swift concerts in Europe. That's a big deal in itself. Plus, of course, Wimbledon, French Open, the Champions League, which is, the Super Bowl of soccer over here, is in London at Wembley Stadium this year on June 1st. So the F1 races, it used to be that just everybody wanted to go to the Monaco Grand Prix. Now everybody wants to go to every F1 race around the world. And there are several over here that pre-COVID we never even touched. And, post-COVID, we're selling a lot of Monza, Silverstone, the south of France, and some in Barcelona. So there are several that we're selling throughout Europe. We have the Euros in Germany this year as well. But of course, the Paris Olympics are the big draw, the big talk, what everyone's talking about. And it's of course changed the whole landscape of Paris as a destination this year. We're following it very closely as to what's going to happen in the city when they're starting to put up all the hospitality tents and all the event spaces. And of course, it's the first Olympics that they're doing outside of a stadium, where they're doing it on the river. So the city will be shut down definitely the day of. And of course, in the lead up to it, of course, the river, they're taking a lot of boats off the river, or they're shutting down the river to any traffic. I don't know exactly when, but within a week or so before, maybe even 2 weeks before that. So any tourists that are coming before the Olympics start, they might not be able to do a Seine River cruise for the sightseeing cruise or the dinner cruises, because those boats are going to be on the side getting ready for the big events. So there's a lot of watch this space. So my recommendation is, if you are an Olympics junkie and you really want to go to the Paris Olympics, it's going to be an amazing Olympics to go to, and you should. But if you are going to Paris for the first time this year, let's wait. Come another time. Don't come this summer. It's not the best time for a first timer to experience Paris. We are trying to sell other areas outside of Paris throughout France that are not going to be affected by the Olympics. Oh, it's also the D-Day celebration, 75th anniversary this year. I think it's the 75th. It's an anniversary year. So there are so many things happening in France this year. We're noticing a lot of people that want to come March and April, which April is generally a great time to come. This year, we're seeing an influx of people that want to come in April rather than May, because they know that, May gets busy, and then it's French Open, and then it goes right into D-Day and all the Olympics events and everything else. Also, Tour de France is going to impact Italy this year, because it starts in Florence on the 28th or the 29th of June. So that is going to impact anyone going to Italy. If you're into the Tour de France, you're going to see the first time that it's departing from Florence. But if you're not really interested in the Tour de France and you're really going because you want to explore Florence and Tuscany, avoid the 28th of June. It's not the best day to be in Florence. And then it will go up into Emilia-Romagna, and then over across into the Alps, and into, there, and then down, and then into Provence, and then down to the south of France, where it will end. So it's the first year it's not ending on the Champs-Élysées. In terms of family travel, I have definitely seen so many more multi-generational families traveling with us, or grandparents that are bringing the grandkids and leaving the parents at home. So I had one of your readers today on the phone talking about an itinerary for Paris, for Provence, and it's the grandmother taking the grandkids. So the parents are staying at home. We also had an amazing family. I think there were 11 people that did London and Paris combination over Thanksgiving, which, as Brooke said, it's an incredible time to come to Europe, because it's not as busy. And if you're really into the festive holiday season, everything is lit up. So it's the perfect time to get into the holiday spirit and get away from, not have to worry about missing school or work because you're off, but we're open here. We don't celebrate Thanksgiving. So I think, there's so much to look forward to this year. And I wouldn't say ignore Europe at all, but, there are ways of being smart about scheduling your trip, and also the logistics on the ground. We do our best to make sure that we manage the itineraries that we put together with you, so that, the kids do get the downtime that they need, that they do get the iPad time, or they do get the running around and being active outside in the parks, and it's not overly scheduled. I would say my biggest piece of advice, having a child myself and traveling with her since she was born, she's now 11, is don't overschedule, especially coming over the water on a red eye and an overnight flight. You don't want to schedule something maybe the next day's morning, because you don't know how the jet lag is going to affect your family, and then you lose that tour. And that's really unfortunate and sad. So I would always say, keep everyone awake and active the first day, and then try to go to sleep at our time at night, get on the schedule. And then the next morning, maybe, don't do something that morning, do something that afternoon. But always try to schedule something, maybe something little each day until you are acclimated, but also to give everybody a purpose and get you out of the hotel.
That's great advice. That's what we did with our little kids. Speaking of sleep deprivation, I want everybody to know that Jennifer is coming to us from London. It is after midnight in London, England, and she stayed up this late to share this intel with us. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Now let's move on to Meg Austin, who's in Vail, Colorado. Meg is our wow lister for the Caribbean, parts of the United States, skiing, dive vacations. And Meg, you're such an expert on like North America and how to make families happy here. Tell us what your advice is.
Well, family travel has been a passion of mine since I had children, which was 31 years ago. So I've been traveling with my children for that amount of time. As far as family travel goes today, we are seeing quite a number of extended families wanting places to go, places to visit. And I agree, the pace is important. That's what Susan had mentioned. Don't overschedule. That's what Jennifer mentioned. I will say, Jennifer, it sounds exhausting in Europe. Forget Europe. Come to the Caribbean. Come to Hawaii. I also feel like everybody was doing 3 tips. So I just kind of wrote down my 3 tips for families. The big thing is, if the children are happy, the parents are happy. If the parents are happy, the grandparents are happy. End of story. That's how it works. So you really have to hone in on how to keep the children happy, but you also have to work on the dynamic of the travel itself. So my 3 tips right now, when this is over, go check your passport expiration date. So many people have forgotten to check, and it just creeps up, and then, oh my goodness, I will say the getting a new passport is a lot easier than it was, but it's still difficult. Air schedules are important, so check. I mean, it's not only the time of year, but air schedules. Give yourself enough time if you're connecting, and better yet, try to find something nonstop. I really try hard to do that for my clients. It's okay, let's not go here. We've got new nonstops here. Why don't we look at something on this island, or New York to Eagle right now, nonstop if you want to ski. There's a lot of ways to make it more seamless. And then I actually have 4 tips. Passports, air, always pack your sense of humor and your patience. That's really important. But things for families to think about in the Caribbean, Hawaii. So the Caribbean, Hawaii domestic ski, we're all big sellers for COVID. So the pricing went way up. We're starting finally to see some better pricing, especially in Hawaii, Maui. After all the issues that they had with the fires in Lahaina, Maui really wants to see some tourism, and their pricing reflects it. And there's some great nonstop flights. Ski resorts. I mean, ski resorts are still overpriced, but less so now. And I anticipate them to go down next year. And then, of course, ski resorts in the summer. There's so much to do at a ski resort in the summer, and there's so many great venues, and there's so many. The Boston Philharmonic, the New York Philharmonic are in my backyard. I love that. And then you can go hiking, and the farmers markets, the farm to table. Look at the off seasons. Look at the shoulder seasons. Veer from the peak season, unless you absolutely have to. But even the peak season, there's ways to work around it with a right advisor. Another place is the whale shark in August. Traveling to Isla Contoy, you fly into Cancun, so many nonstops into Cancun. The whale shark in August is slow season, and it's also hurricane season. So of course, insurance is important, but I'm down there in August all the time. But you can be in the water with 40 whale shark. It's incredible. We are also seeing a lot of specials this spring here in the Rockies. I have never seen specials being offered over President's Weekend at some of our top hotels, and we're seeing them. So it's a good time to think about skiing, last minute even. Like the Park Hyatt's doing every 3rd night free, and that's in Beaver Creek. So there's a lot of specials. Also, one thing I wanted to say, I've got 11 people I just put together that are WOW readers, travelers. they wanted to go to the Caribbean, and one son who had it's grandparents, that the son who also has a 9-month-old daughter has not gotten a passport. Mom knows that he will not get a passport in time, even if he says he will. So the Caribbean got thrown out, but we got him into Puerto Rico. There's some hotels, the Fairmont, Puerto Rico has got some wonderful deals. So find out where those open holes are, and then remember to check your passports, nonstop air, sense of humor, and patience. That's what I got.
Well, that's a lot, Meg. Thank you so much. It's awesome. They're great ideas there. Now let's move to Zach Ravenor of Journey Mexico. Zach is our favorite Mexico travel specialist, but he also knows a lot of Latin America because he took his sons on a family road trip. How long was that, Zach? How long was that road trip?
Hi, Wendy. That was
Hi.
8 months. 8 months. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think what was really interesting. So first of all, hello everyone. Thank you, Wendy. Great to see all of everyone's faces. It was 8 months, and it was my wife and my 2 boys, who at the time were 13 and 10, and my mother, who is now 81. At the time, she was 78. And she's actually just wrote me a text message from India. She's traveling right now in India, so she's a real traveler. She came and met up with us, along with my wife's parents as well, in different iconic locations along the route. So we did, nuclear family travel, and then we did extended family travel. So there's a lot that we learned there. And of course, where do you learn more than from your kids, right? Your kids, just like Wendy took out the tips that her kids gave her, and Brooke as well. One of the things that we learned is you have to really, whoops, I thought I had that off. I do have it off, but my mom has an override. So you have to take everyone's interest into account. So involve everyone in the planning process. That's a big part, and not just to avoid missteps, but to engage everyone and to get them excited about it and looking forward to certain parts of the trip. And I think that Susan kind of spoke to that a bit. Another piece of it is to have multiple levels of things going on, right? So you can't always please everybody. You sometimes compromise, but also it's all right for people to do different things. And a great planner, a great advisor, can set up multiple itineraries at the same time. Or you have opt-outs, right? So maybe the grandparents want to go back to the hotel in the evening after, or in the afternoon after an active morning and a great lunch. So having that kind of flexibility is somewhere where I think great advisors and travel experts can really add value to the planning process. What else? We also learned on our trip that it's really good to, and while an 8-month expedition from Tierra del Fuego back to Mexico is quite different than your regular week-long holiday, it still holds true, and we continue to do this even until today, is assign responsibilities to each of the kids. So one of my kids is really keen with maps and geography. And I can't tell you how many times, despite Google Maps and GPS and all of that, he would say, Dad, I think you missed the turn. So, engaging them in whatever it is. My other son never knows where he is, but he's an avid reader. So we would have him kind of giving us historical background and information about the different sites we were going to. Another responsibility was tipping, that they should know who we have to tip, what's customary, and to make sure that the money is ready, whether it's in mom's pocket or dad's pocket, or even if they're handling the cash. Another trend that we're seeing, so those are a few things that we learned on the sabbatical, and many, many more. Everybody, more generally, everybody asked me, like, what was the favorite destination? What was the best place you went? And remember, we covered 15,000 miles, and we went to 13 countries. And Antarctica. And so that was difficult, right? What's your favorite place? But what really was lasting was just how special the time was as a family. and how it transformed our relationships with each one of us and as a whole, as the family entity, as the family animal. And that's forever, and that's really transformative and life-changing. So I think we all kind of mentioned that as well. Mexico specific, and I could speak a little bit to, or one last thing. We're seeing a big trend, and I think the baby boomers continue to shape our world. And so now it's a lot of grandparents with their kids, or parents with their adult children, I'd call it. And so that's a very different trip than parents with young kids. So that becomes quite interesting, and you have still interesting new things that you have to take into consideration. So, you know, the 20 or 30-year-old set kind of wants to know about great foodie spots and, you know, nightlife and bars and party scene and design stuff, whereas their parents are kind of ready to go back to the hotel after dinner. And so again, this kind of flexibility and having multiple things and taking everyone's interests into account. Finally, I'll wrap up with a bit of Mexico specific. Most of us who have, you know, we have to travel during these peak seasons with families because our kids are off school and you've got to travel at Christmas or New Year's or spring break or whatever. So you can't go to the shoulder seasons, which is a great strategy to find kind of less crowded places, but you can go to less trod paths, right? Lesser visited destinations. And in Mexico, that would mean perhaps go beyond the beach during New Year's week, head to Oaxaca or Chiapas or Southern Baja beyond Los Cabos, or even Mexico City, which has become incredibly hot, popular. So many Wendy Perrin travelers are going to Mexico City right now and loving it. So yeah, keep your mind open about the destinations even within a country and go to those what might be considered secondary or tertiary destinations. You can find a lot of value, less crowds, and more enjoyable travels.
That's awesome advice, Zach. Thank you. We also gave our kids jobs. We assigned them like one of the, like on our trips, like especially CFO. I liked putting them in charge of the budget. That really gets them, you know, it's a good learning experience. Anyway, moving on, I want to introduce you all to Jim Berkeley, who is an expert on, well, the Middle East on the WOW list, but also the whole world and ancient civilizations in many different countries. Jim is with Destinations and Adventures International. And tell us, Jim, about traveling with your son, Theo. I think you took him on a 40-day Mediterranean cruise. And of course, he's been to all kinds of countries.
Well, thank you, Wendy. And I just want to say it's such a pleasure to be among these wonderful travel professionals that you've assembled. I'll tell you about Theo in a second, but I just want to bring up a couple of points because I know we have a time issue. One thing we always do when we're designing trips is to select guides that have children. You know, I think that's one of the most important things because if they've had children, they know when the eyes can start turning around. And to be frank with you, they always say, Mr. Jim, it was the parents' eyes that were turning before the kids. So I find that having guides with children is an incredibly important thing. On my first trip to Egypt with Theo, he was then about 5 or 6. I'm a photographer. And I noticed he was watching me with my camera, a big Nikon. So all of a sudden I gave it to him. And before I knew it, he was up there shooting the columns and the capitals, and really engaged him just by all of a sudden letting him pretend that he was an adult photographer. The other thing we've learned over the years is one size does not fit all. So what may work for Brooke and Zeke, who wanted to go cycling on the west bank of Luxor, may not be good for another family. And another thing about parents, and I get this, being a parent myself, people go into this being very worried about, are we going to get our kids, are they going to be bored? How do we get them engaged? But I find that the parents maybe are a little overly worried about it, and that if they rely on, again, the guides knowing how to deal with children and letting the kids' imaginations fly, that's what travel is all about. I mean, let's be honest, the world is their classroom. The world is their classroom, and each destination can be such an incredible experience. So briefly, Wendy, yeah, thank you. My wife is a culinary historian. She was a Bon Appetit for 11 years. And last summer, she curated the Epicurean expeditions on Atlas Ocean Voyages. And Theo and I got to tag along for 40 days and nights, believe it or not. And that was a bit of a challenge to keep Theo interested. I'm an Indiana Jones guy, and I want to see every temple, every ruin, every dig. That's me. But I knew I couldn't do that to Theo. So we got him involved, going off and on the ship with the kayaking and the stand-up paddleboarding. Then we'd go in, I'd say we had gone to Athens about 3 times, and he was gotten into cards. I said, Theo, let's go card shopping in the Plaka. So we found this amazing shop that had, it was a chess store, a backgammon store, and cards. And he was fascinated to find that kind of a shop. So, if you let your own creativity go, as well as your children's creativity, couple that with guides who really know what makes kids work, I think you can have wonderful journeys wherever you go.
Awesome. That's great advice. I know, and I know Jennifer, I just know that you have an incredible, we all know incredible guides out there, but I don't know how you have so many of them. So we get so many reviews from travelers who have done trips through you and through Queen of Clubs, and they're like, there's so many child-friendly guides somehow that you managed to find in France and England and Italy. So thank you on behalf of all these travelers.
No, thank you.
you.
Thank you. No, families are our number one client. So what we've done over the years, and it's very important that they can read the crowd and especially the kids and keep them engaged. So we have categorized our guides, and if they don't have kids or they don't like guiding with kids, we automatically move them to another, area. They're just for the adult clients, or so we really categorize best for kids, best for adults, best for art, best for food, and so we have a very wide spectrum of guides that we categorize as our number one, category 1 guides.
And I've also sometimes invited my guide's children along with us on a day. If I find out that my guide has kids close in age to my son, and if you're in an English-speaking country, or the kids in one place in Vietnam, my guide was married to a British woman, so his kids spoke English, and that's a great way for your kid to interact with local children, and then they're kind of off doing their own thing, and you can chat with the guide about what you're interested in, whether it's history or culture, whatever.
Well, we've got some questions. Brooke, do you want to run us through some of the questions?
Sure. Yeah, we got some questions here live, and we have some questions that some of you submitted beforehand. So the first question that came in from Nancy tonight, I'm wondering if maybe each of you can think of one answer for this. We can go around. Our grandchildren, Nancy's grandchildren, are 4, 7, and 9. And she's asking, what are your trip recommendations for places to travel internationally? What's one place that each of you thinks, because that's a kind of a range of ages. Zach, what's your idea?
Yeah, so I remember those days, and honestly, little kids is challenging, as Hannah mentioned. Staying to the closer international destinations, sun and sand is a good idea for little kids. Stay active, but be close to, meltdown zone, room, bed, nap. Those are all good recommendations. And active, right? Little kids like water, they like swimming, they like snorkeling, they like pools, they like all those things. And also I think having some of their, not that they shouldn't be adventurous and try new things, but also having access to restaurants or ways to give them kind of comfort food for them is also a way to make them feel less out of sorts. Those are a few things.
Is there a great spot in Mexico that has that sun and sand that you would recommend?
I mean, Mexico,
I know there are
probably
plenty,
everybody here and everybody who's listening has been to many places in Mexico, from Los Cabos to Riviera Maya to Tulum to Puerto Vallarta and Punta de Mita. Mexico is full. I mean, I think that's kind of like the main bulk of the market comes to Mexico when it's cold in North America. And yeah, so there's so many. I love Puerto Vallarta. I have a home in Puerto Vallarta. But yeah, there's many, many, many.
Meg, I saw you agreeing with the idea of staying relatively close to home. Where did you-
Nonstop flight, ages 4, 7, and 9. Yes, just what Zach said. You've got to keep them busy, but not too busy. You've got to set them up for success. So really, it's going to be more about all of you being together. However, I'm a diver and I've been diving for quite a while. And when my children were young, even at ages 4, 7, and 9, we would go to, I mean, one thing I should have mentioned before, all inclusives have taken on a very new spin. They've got Michelin rated restaurants. It's a great value, and it's a great way to experience a week together with small children. So we would be at, maybe it was an all-inclusive, maybe it wasn't, but there would be a kids club, and my husband and I would go dive, and then the kids would take our dive gear, young, I know, but they would just get in the shallow end of the pool and have a tea party at the bottom of the pool. And they would love that, or build the biggest sandcastle. So really, it's, you know, keep them as busy as they can be, but, you know, have them learn too. I mean, the cenotes in the Riviera Maya, have them see some of the stalagmites and the stalactites, and learn about the history and the armadillos that are the size of me that they used to find down there. But 4, 7, and 9 is the key times to be traveling with your children. And spectacular.
And one thing, Meg, one thing I remember, you were an advisor for my family when we went skiing in Vail when they were little, and you were so insistent, make sure it's ski in, ski out. You don't want to be lugging kids in skis from the mountain to the ski school. And that's the type of stuff, like make it easy. Don't slog through long transfers, long flights, long anything really, right?
Yes, very much so. Thanks, Zach.
I think with that age also, it's important to have the blend like everybody's been mentioning, but also go somewhere where there's an iconic thing that they recognize. Take them to see Big Ben, take them to see the pyramids, take them to a destination that they can get something that they'll remember for their life, and then a beach holiday.
I agree with that. I took my daughter to Paris when she was 4, and she was running toward the Eiffel Tower. You know, it was just, she recognized it right away. So, but I do agree with London as well. Hannah, you said that you took your kids here, and we're probably part of the same West London group chat for moms, but that is it's such a great city for children of all ages. And even for the young ones, they have little, you know, shows that are, you know, off of, you know, they're on the stage, but they're from books that the kids are reading, you know, the parents are reading to the kids at such a young age. And there's so many incredible, you know, sensory and stimulating art, you know, the LED art exhibitions, the frameless, I think is super cool for young kids. And then the parks, you know, Hyde Park, Regent's Park, the London Zoo, going on the South Bank and walking around and going on the river. There's just so much here. So I think there's a lot that could be done.
Even going
And
on those red buses was exciting for
the
my
red bus and the London Eye, and you
yeah.
know, there's.
And then we had a great trip recently with my family. There's a direct flight from Newark to Nice, and my husband wanted to see went to see the Rugby World Cup, but we stayed in an Airbnb with grandparents on the French Riviera, so there was ocean, which thrilled my kids. And for me, a food lover, there was amazing food and markets, and that was another wonderful option, I think, for little ones.
And I'll put in a plug for exotic travel with young kids. When my son was 4, I just needed to travel. And it was really more about me than about him, to be totally honest, that I had spent 3 years not traveling, at least, you know, far abroad. And I really wanted to do it again. And we took him to Southeast Asia, and for 2 weeks, there were moments when my husband and I looked at each other and said, what on earth are we doing? But there were also, it was an investment in the future and in us learning to travel together. And we all got a lot out of it. And that was a trip where, you know, he met some Vietnamese girls and played with them on playgrounds. And, you know, does he remember any specific moment of the trip? No, but I really do think it laid the groundwork for him learning how to travel and to enjoy it. So you don't have to be afraid of that if you're really looking to go far abroad.
Brooke, we started early with Theo as well, and to this day, he doesn't say where we're going. He says, Dad, can we go to the departure lounge? Because he knows something. We're going somewhere.
Love it. Love it. Now we've gotten a lot of questions. A lot of people are really concerned about the food. You know, kind of how are you going to feed this big group? Kids are picky eaters. Salma wrote, can you provide advice for meal planning and going out to eat for large family trips, like talking 10 or more people? Can you each talk about, you know, what solutions do you have when you've got a big group with, and maybe not everyone wants to sit through a 3-course meal, but maybe some people do want to have nicer food? Meg is, yeah.
I'm raising my hand. Well, that just goes to my comment on the all-inclusive. A lot of people are so completely against an all-inclusive, but when you're with an extended family, you can't look at it as a prison. You have to look at it as great value. Eat breakfast and lunch there. If you don't have to eat dinner there every night, the value allows you to still go out for dinner. But oh my God, when you take your kids out to dinner and you've got 5 or 6 of them in an extended family, one's not going to eat because they ate a snack before. They get back to the room and it's like, Mom, I'm hungry. Well, you can take them right back to the buffet. You can call room service. It's included. It's a stress reliever. If you get a villa, you can have chefs come in. But it's so different than if you are at an all-inclusive resort. And again, there's all-inclusives now. Hyatt is big time in the program. Marriott's autograph collections are in the program. Hilton has a lot. They're really seeing the value, but taking it up a level to where the food really, you can go to all-inclusives where there's really Michelin-rated restaurants.
Mm.
So that value is key.
That's a good point. Yeah. And Zach, you want to chime in as well? I think you're still muted.
Meg touched on it briefly, but I would reiterate, I think that private homes and villas and residences in Mexico, they're amazing. And first of all, it's not like, someone comes in for breakfast or lunch. You have staff there, they cook for you all day long. Mexican staff cooks amazing Mexican food. You're saving on the F&B, so you're saving a lot of money. It's great value, and it's total flexibility. Another great thing that we find with bigger groups and families, and you can't do this every day, but putting in some kind of cooking experience and learning, how to cook Mexican food, the whole gang, and people can run around. Hopefully it's at a home of some sort. There might be other kids running around. So it's a whole immersive experience. And then, the obvious, right, is why you would work with people like us, why Wendy has found us, is we know how to get reservations for big groups, and it's hard. And you got to go, not tomorrow for the next day for Pujol in Mexico City, but give us time, do it in advance, and get some reservations in place, and it can be done. But in general, kids in restaurants anyway, little kids in restaurants are a pain. So I think the all-inclusive route, the room service route, the villa route are the ways to do it. And also hotels that have a little mini kitchen of some sort. I know my wife loved that, to be able to kind of not cook the whole time, but prepare little things or kind of have some food that you took home from a restaurant ready in a refrigerator or something to kind of warm up. Those are good solutions too.
Yeah.
I have to add that if you've got picky eaters, those cooking experiences will solve that problem very quickly, because when a kid has cooked the food, they love it. In any country, however weird the food, if they did it themselves, they're going to eat the whole thing and they're going to tell their friends back home. So
I think Zach hit the nail on the head on that. It's our job as travel professionals to know we've sorted this out. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know the restaurants that will work and the ones that don't work.
Yeah, I've been turned on to great restaurants that have really authentic, excellent local food, and also hot dogs for when my son was really young. I'm sorry, Jennifer, you're going to mention?
No, I was just going to say, with the family that we had to London and Paris, though, they were 11 people, all different ages, from grandparents down to young children, with dietary requirements and lots of allergies too. And we had to pre-book the lunches and the dinners because they were such a large party and they wanted to go out to dinner every night. They were staying in a hotel. But they didn't, I literally went through the menus with the grandmother. We were very meticulous about everything that we chose, but when you're coming to big cities, we do have to pre-book those reservations. for large parties. And sometimes you have to split the group between, 6 and 5 in this situation. We had to do that a couple of times, which the kids actually liked because they felt like adults sitting at their own table rather than having to be with the adults all the time. So it worked out in the end, but I do recommend, if you're coming to city destinations, to definitely pre-arrange and pre-book. But we do a lot of the apartment rentals as well, where a chef will come in and cook for you, or pre-stocking the refrigerator before the clients arrive, so that everything is already there, the fresh fruit, the milk, and the water, the juice, everything that they need.
That's great. We got a couple of questions before tonight from groups that had kind of different levels of mobility. Maybe a grandma who walks with a cane, a 90-year-old grandparents with limited mobility, but really still want to travel. And I will say that the trips that my mother mentioned earlier tonight we ended up taking 2 cruises, and we didn't think we were a cruise family. We'd never done it before, but my father was in his 80s. That guided us to choose a particular ship in the Galapagos that was large enough that he could stay on board. And there was a library, there was a lounge, there was a bar, it was a large enough ship. It wasn't a 16-passenger catamaran where kind of everyone wants to get out and do the activities. And the rest of us would go snorkeling, or, we'd go for a hike on an island or something. And then we'd come back in the evening and he'd hear the stories of what we'd done that day. And Mom, do you want to speak to kind of how that worked for our group?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that was critical to my husband, who's a writer, was that there was internet on the ship. And it seems like a simple thing, but at the time there wasn't internet on every ship, but it gave him something purposeful to do while we were out zodiacking around or snorkeling or whatever. And he was able to go on a few of the outings that I think was important. But yeah, we were surprised that a cruise would offer so much that was really useful for us.
And it led us to that particular ship, and that we might not have chosen, had it just been 3 or 4 of us, might have been a smaller catamaran, but it really worked well for that group. So there are options like that when you have kind of different mobility levels.
I think
and also that ship offered us a lot of kids for our Brooke's son to play with, which was nice.
I think villa vacations also are great for people with different mobility levels, because the grandparents or the people who want a slower pace, they can just sit and enjoy the beautiful view. And then the kids can get all their energy out in the pool.
By the way, there is one thing that we didn't touch on, which I've seen a big trend with, is this whole idea of learning. It's a huge thing, and families, parents want their kids to learn, and but to do that in an amazing way, right? And how you can immerse people in a learning situation. And it started out with kind of people wanted to do volunteering things or community things, but that wasn't exciting. That was kind of like a punishment to the kids. So figuring out how to have real, genuine interaction with local communities. I think, again, the food is a great way to do it, through cooking, through sport, whether it's soccer or another sport. And also agriculture, like going out, whether it's vineyards or cornfields, or learning about, that whole part of where the food comes from and getting out into the countryside. We've seen a lot of success with things like that, with multi-generational families and that whole learning component.
Absolutely. My kids, they're in college now, but we did a lot of that sort of not just, we'd always visit a school. We'd always, try to help out in a local community, like volunteer type of experiences. And actually, both of my kids ended up writing about that for their college admissions essays, those experiences on those trips. So it comes in handy one way or another. Are there any other questions, Brooke, that we should answer before? No, I think you're muted.
Yeah, we got through all of them.
Okay, yeah. All right. Well, I guess we're out of time. Thank you. I can't thank you all enough. You guys are you make awesome panelists. So again, it was Jennifer Virgilio of Queen of Clubs, who is coming to us from London and is on the WOW list for France, England, Italy, Switzerland. She does it all. And Meg Austin with Meg to Book. And she is on the WOW list for the Caribbean, for dive vacations, ski vacations in the US. Zach Rabinor of Journey Mexico. He's our favorite Mexico specialist. And Jim Berkeley of Destinations and Adventures. And he's on the WOW list for various, as I said, places in the Middle East, but he knows the whole world. Thank you all so much for joining us. Jennifer, you get a gold
Bonus.
star for coming to us after midnight in London. And
Thank you.
I hope you all will join us. I mean, I hope that our audience tonight will join us again tomorrow night for our WOW Week talk on travel, emergency assistance and travel insurance. And then also on Friday night for how to take better photos with your phone. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye.
Yeah.